One question. Do I feel lucky? Well, do you, punk?
Clint Eastwood has always appeared as the embodiment of toughness on screen, a man of few words, yet able to silence the world the moment he walks into frame. You may have heard that he once worked as a golf caddy, slept in an old pickup truck, and spent nearly a decade being turned away by Hollywood. You may also know the headlines: his long, quiet relationships, the speech that split public opinion, or his private lifestyle that seems almost unusual for someone so famous. But what few people truly understand is how a man who never chased the spotlight, never used social media, and never flaunted his wealth, managed to build a film empire worth hundreds of millions of dollars, and what kept him standing steadfast for more than 70 years in an industry where so many familiar faces have faded into memory. This isn't just the story of an actor, it's the portrait of a man who lived by principle and built a legacy through quiet strength. If you enjoy videos like this, please remember to hit the like button. It helps us more than you know. And feel free to share your thoughts in the comments below. Everyone knows Clint Eastwood as the very definition of American masculinity: the steely eyes, the unshakable stance, and that voice, deep and gravelly like sand mixed with stone. You might have heard that he once lived on the edge, doing whatever work he could find, from golf caddy to forest firefighter, just to make it through the day. But what almost no one knows is that in 1951, while still in the military, Clint Eastwood nearly died in the freezing waters of the Pacific Ocean. And it was after that desperate swim for survival alone in open water that a brief encounter, seemingly insignificant at the time, opened the door to a destiny no one, not even Clint, could have imagined. He was born in 1930 in San Francisco, right in the aftermath of the Great Depression. His family wasn't destitute, but they were never stable. His father was a laborer who changed jobs frequently. Every move meant a new town, a new school, and Clint becoming the quiet kid in the corner, always observing more than speaking. There was no single tragedy, but peace was always out of reach. At one point, he was expelled for scribbling a harmless joke on the school's sports bulletin board. After that, college was no longer part of the plan. He chose to survive by working with his hands. He cleaned out warehouses, washed cars, cut lumber. At one point, he lived in an old truck parked behind a grocery store, living off cold bread just to save a few dollars for rent. When the U.S. entered the Korean War, Clint was drafted. He wasn't sent into combat, but was stationed at Fort Ord in California. Working in logistics and training, most of his time there passed quietly until one flight changed everything. That day, Clint boarded a Douglas AD aircraft for a routine transport. Mid-flight, the plane ran out of fuel and lost control. With no other choice, the crew crash-landed off the coast of Point Reyes. No proper life vest, no clear instructions, just endless ocean and a young soldier forced to decide sink or swim. Clint dove into the icy water and swam for hours, battling waves, frigid currents, and exhaustion. But in the end, he reached the shore. For most, that would have been a life-altering trauma. For Clint, it was just another day survived like so many before it. A week later, still sore from the ordeal, he ran into an old acquaintance back at Fort Ord, someone with a few casual connections to Universal Studios. They spoke for just a few minutes, but that handshake became the first door to open, transforming Clint Eastwood from an anonymous Army supply clerk into a face America would never forget. Clint Eastwood didn't walk into Hollywood through the front door. He came in through the side quietly, unnoticed, armed with nothing more than a quick handshake at Fort Ord and a half-hearted recommendation. While working as a lifeguard, Clint met Chuck Hill, who happened to know a cameraman at Universal. There was no glamorous audition, no formal contract, but his tall frame, calm demeanor, and steady gaze made people pause just a moment longer than usual. Director Arthur Lubin didn't see immediate talent, but he saw something marketable in Clint's face. He advised him to get training. And so, the young man who once slept in the back of a truck to avoid paying rent began taking night acting classes, rehearsing lines alone in a silent room. The next few years were filled with forgettable roles, lines that were cut, scenes that went unnoticed. More than once, Clint walked home from an audition unsure if he'd even be asked back the next week. While other rising stars like Robert Redford were studying at prestigious acting schools and already buying land for ranch homes, Clint was still counting every dollar of his paycheck just enough to cover class fees and a modest dinner. No spotlight, no fanfare, and no one expected much. But he kept going. Then, in 1959, things began to change. Clint was cast as Rowdy Yates in the television series Rawhide, a steady role, a long-term contract, and, for the first time, a wide audience began noticing the tall cowboy riding across the screen. Rawhide opened the door, but the real breakthrough came from across the ocean. A Fistful of Dollars 1964, his role as the man with no name in Sergio Leone's spaghetti western launched Clint into global box office stardom. The expressionless face, the icy stare, the pistol slung low on his hip, and a code of honor that didn't bend right was right. Wrong was wrong. He didn't say much, and no one expected him to. While many Hollywood stars were spending their earnings on hillside mansions in Beverly Hills, Clint quietly saved his money and founded Malpaso Productions, his own company. Created so he could control what he truly believed in. His directorial debut, Play Misty for Me, 1971, proved he was more than an actor. Then came Dirty Harry, a new symbol of action cinema, and of Clint himself, unapologetic, uncompromising, and yet deeply human. He never sought attention. He built a style, and through that style, from the eyes, the voice, the way his characters moved, Clint Eastwood became more than a box office draw. He became a cinematic brand and soon began earning tens of millions not just from acting, but from producing, licensing, and the influence he commanded. From a man who once slept in a truck, he began envisioning a home with a view of the ocean, not to show off, but to enjoy something he'd never had before: complete freedom. And that's where a quiet, private, but undeniably powerful way of life began to take shape. Clint Eastwood didn't become famous by chance. He earned it by pressing forward when all of Hollywood once turned him away. After his breakout role in A Fistful of Dollars, Clint didn't rest on fame. Instead, he founded Malpaso Productions, his own company, built so he could make films on his terms, without having to answer to anyone else. In 1971, he directed his first film, Play Misty for Me, and soon after exploded onto the scene with Dirty Harry, where he defined the image of cold, relentless justice. The line, "Do you feel lucky?" didn't just become a catchphrase, it marked Clint's transition into a powerhouse filmmaker. His peak came in 1992 with Unforgiven, which earned him 2 Academy Awards for Best Picture and Best Director. He repeated that feat 12 years later with $1 Million Baby, 2 more Oscars that cemented his legendary status. Films like Gran Torino, Mystic River, and American Sniper only confirmed one thing: Clint doesn't follow trends, he creates his own path. To date, he's directed over 30 films, grossing more than $3.5 billion worldwide. His personal fortune is estimated at over $375 million, much of it built through producing, owning his films, and knowing exactly when to release them. While many stars spend on supercars and parties, Clint invested in land, his own studios, and projects he could fully control. No flash, no noise. He used success to buy freedom. And once he'd succeeded enough to stop proving anything, Clint began living the way only someone who's lost everything can truly understand: quietly, privately, but always with intention. Not mansions to show off, not assets to count, just places he personally chose, spaces that reflect what he values most: peace. Carmel by the Sea Estate, perched on a cliff where the ocean wind touches every window pane. Clint's home opens not with grand paintings or crystal chandeliers, but with stillness. Mornings often find him standing by a crackling fireplace, fingers resting on an old Steinway piano, the underside inscribed with his first wife's name. Exposed 19th century beams stretch across the high ceilings. Every step on the mahogany floor echoes like a warm whisper. A stone wall leads to the back porch, where a large armchair sits worn at the armrest from Clint's hand, placed there each late afternoon for more than 30 years. This is where he wrote the final lines of Unforgiven, the ocean wind tapping at the glass like an unscripted score. Valued at over $20 million, but what matters most can't be found in paperwork. It lives in the quiet details Clint preserved, not for price, but for memory. Pebble Beach Villa. If Carmel is where he rests, Pebble Beach is where he lives as an artist, tucked along the iconic 17-mile drive. The house faces the sea and backs into pine-covered hills. Each stone on the steps was hand-picked by Clint from Napa, where he once filmed The Bridges of Madison County. Inside, the air smells of oak smoke and worn leather. On the wall, a hand-drawn map of an old film set, framed like a battlefield relic. Clint often reads scripts here, feet up on a redwood table, the fading sunlight tracing the veins in the same hands that once held cameras and wrote scenes that needed no words. Once appraised at nearly $10 million, a young director once asked him why he hadn't sold it. Clint simply smiled, because the wind here doesn't come twice. Rising River Ranch, Bernie, California. If there's a place Clint calls his domain, it's this one, spanning over 1,000 acres. The ranch is complete with forest, streams, pastures, stables, even a custom archery range. But more than that, it's where Clint lives, as if fame never touched him. He wakes at dawn, brews coffee in an old mocha pot, then drives across the land in an ATV. Checking on the grounds, some days, he speaks less than 10 words, not out of sadness, but because there's nothing that needs saying. When friends visit, he takes them to a spring that runs fastest in April, tells stories about a deer that once wandered onto the porch. The living room is floored in natural granite, with a fireplace carved with the words, "The quiet man rides alone." In the storage barn, he keeps a broken-legged wooden chair from his parents, not functional, but never thrown away. It's been around longer than anyone still alive. He once said, "Sun Valley Cabin, Idaho, deep in the snowy woods, far from cell service or city lights." Clint's log cabin stands like a winter daydream. Entering, you'll see him take off his leather gloves, hang up his scarf, and settle into an old upholstered chair, the one piece he refuses to replace. The cabin holds a private library filled only with books on film, history, and philosophy. A quiet reminder that Clint lives not just by camera, but by thought. When the snow covers the rooftop, he heats water, types scripts on a vintage Remington, and pauses now and then to toss another log into the fire. And in that cabin, no one asks for autographs. They just sit beside him in silence, gazing out the frosted window like looking into a world before phones, before noise, before everything got so fast. Wherever Clint Eastwood lives, he leaves a mark not through sound, but presence. And when he leaves a home, the only sound you'll hear is the engine of a very particular machine starting up. Because to Clint, even his vehicles carry memory. 1964 Ferrari 250 GT Lusso. This isn't a car for showboating. Its silver paint has a soft misted patina, the body a flowing line from another era. It's the kind of Ferrari only true collectors recognize at a glance. Clint bought it in the late 60s, after the spaghetti westerns took off. It's not behind glass. He still drives it once a month, usually on quiet Sunday mornings through Carmel. If you ever see a silver-haired man in sunglasses taking a vintage Ferrari up a seaside hill, it might just be him. Valued at over $3.5 million, but to Clint, it's simply a machine that doesn't need explaining. 1972 Ford Gran Torino Sport. Most fans associate this car with his 2008 film Gran Torino. But the truth is, Clint owned it long before the script was ever written. He bought it in the early 70s, right after wrapping a Dirty Harry film, and kept it like an extension of himself. There's still a scratch on the right door made when he backed it into his garage after moving to Carmel. When it came time to shoot Gran Torino, no prop car was needed. Clint simply drove his own onto the set, adjusted the mirror, and rolled camera. To this day, it sits in his garage beside a sunlit window, a silent co-star. 1955 Cadillac Series 62 convertible. A rare classic few know Clint once drove it on his honeymoon with Maggie Johnson. Creamy white exterior, deep red interior, like a fine wine. He once said, "We drove from San Francisco to Nevada, stayed in a terrible little motel, but I've never felt more free." The car was fully restored at nearly $100,000, but still holds the original dashboard radio, the one that first delivered the news he'd landed the Rowdy Yates role. No one touches this car but him. A few times a year, he wipes it down and oils it himself, guarding a memory too personal to share. 1992 GMC Typhoon, Probably the quietest in his collection, a high-performance SUV in a rare forest green. Clint once used it to drive his son Scott to his very first Hollywood audition. It wasn't the flashiest, retailed at about $30,000, but back then, it outran a Ferrari 348. To Clint, it was a reminder appearances don't tell the whole story. People underestimate you when you look simple. That's when you pass them. Clint Eastwood doesn't choose cars for speed or design. He chooses them for their stories, silent co-stars that stood by him for decades. But it's not just four wheels that reflect who he is. Bell Jet Ranger helicopter, freedom in the sky. Unlike most celebrities, Clint doesn't own a private jet. He chose the Bell Jet Ranger helicopter compact, efficient, and quiet. He often sits in the co-pilot seat, headset on, flying quietly from Carmel to Sun Valley. To him, a helicopter isn't just transportation, it's how you leave the world behind. Literally. Pebble Beach Golf Course, a piece of California, preserved in 1999. Clint joined a group to purchase Pebble Beach golf links not just for love of the game, but to keep it out of foreign hands. On weekends, you'll find him near the 7th hole, wearing a soft cap and dark jacket. It's not a place for grand gestures, it's where he feels grounded on land he chose to protect. Clint Eastwood doesn't talk much about what he owns, but everything in his life, whether a helicopter, a golf course, or even a car brush, reflects who he is: steady, intentional, and always choosing the harder road, because it's the right one. Clint Eastwood is not a man without mistakes, but what sets him apart isn't the fact that he stumbled, it's how he stood back up, kept moving forward, and carried himself with the same calm as if no storm had ever passed through. A quiet life full of complexity. As his fame rose with Rawhide, Clint was married to Maggie Johnson, but during that time, he began a 14-year relationship with dancer Roxanne Tunis, which led to the birth of a daughter, Kimber, in 1964. Though the relationship was never public, Clint didn't deny it. He quietly supported Kimber, and from time to time, people would spot him at her amateur performances, not making any announcements, just sitting quietly in the back row. Later, when asked, he simply said, "I wasn't perfect, but I didn't walk away." A short sentence, but filled with choice, and it reflects the same composed honesty he's carried all his life. An expanding family and the lesson of trust. Clint Eastwood has 8 children with several women. One of his most publicly strained relationships was with actress Sandra Locke, who was with him for 14 years after their separation. She sued him over what she called a sham film contract. As the media storm swirled, Clint drove back to his ranch in Bernie. No press conferences, no rebuttals. The wooden gate closed behind him, and for months afterward, the only image anyone saw was familiar an old shirt, a golf club in hand, and a man living the rest of his life on his own terms. Richard Jewell and a clash with the press. In 2019, Clint directed Richard Jewell, a film that sparked controversy over its portrayal of a female reporter. The Atlanta Journal-Constitution objected strongly, demanding a correction. Clint didn't make statements or post explanations, just a quiet disclaimer at the end of the film: no apology, no defense. Perhaps he understood that, in both cinema and in life. Sometimes silence is the most dignified response. The empty chair speech, a stirring moment. In 2012, Clint took the stage at the Republican National Convention with an empty chair beside him, an unscripted metaphorical conversation with President Obama. It was unexpected and polarizing. When the cameras shut off, he said nothing more. The next day, he was seen walking along the streets of Carmel, hands in his coat pockets, head lowered slightly as if he had never stood on that political stage the night before. No memoirs, no talk shows. When scandals break, Clint doesn't make the rounds. He returns to the film set, the golf course, or the garage, not to hide, but to hold fast to what he believes one mistake or one headline shouldn't erase a life built on action. And perhaps that's why Clint Eastwood has preserved the rarest thing of all: resilience. A man may be tangled in controversy, but never lose his core, and from those very trials, Clint left behind not just performances, but a legacy. Clint Eastwood doesn't need to deliver philosophies or write memoirs. He leaves his mark in his own way, quietly, deeply, and most unexpectedly, still in motion. While many younger actors build fashion brands or launch wine labels, Clint is still making films, still editing frames one by one, still walking the beach in Carmel in the early morning. And sometimes, he quietly reshapes a landscape without anyone even noticing. At age 94, he's still directing Juror Number 2, his latest film, released in 2024. No one asked him to keep going, but for Clint, storytelling has never been just a job, it's a way of staying alive. A legacy built through action, not words. Clint Eastwood once said he doesn't like explaining his films, and just like his work, his life is told through quiet, unmistakable gestures. Instead of building academies or launching personal brands like many stars today, Clint has chosen to give back quietly. In 1996, he donated $10,000 to a hospice care center in Florida. A year later, he gifted 49 acres of land in Big Sur to a conservation trust land that could have sold for millions, but he simply wanted to preserve a quiet piece of nature. He's been a longtime supporter of the American Heart Association, Make-A-Wish, and the Film Foundation. No foundations named after him, no donor walls, just help, and then he steps back. Investing in what lasts. While many celebrities pour money into fashion, luxury properties, or vineyards, Clint puts his energy into protecting what matters. A perfect example when he joined the effort to buy back Pebble Beach golf links and keep it from being sold to a foreign corporation. It was a simple gesture, but one that reflected his life's philosophy: protect what's beautiful. What matters before it disappears. On weekends, he's still seen near the 7th hole, a man in a soft shirt and a worn fabric cap, no security in sight, walking slowly beneath the trees, as if the land itself were home. Impact beyond the rankings. Clint Eastwood doesn't preach from a stage, he lives by what he believes. His children, like Scott Eastwood, had to carve their own paths, never relying on their father's name, and just like the films he makes. There's no obvious message, but people often leave the theater with the quiet urge to live a little better. Clint doesn't leave behind slogans or statues in his name, but through his movies and the way he treats nature, family, and community, he reminds us of something simple. You don't have to be perfect to leave something meaningful behind. Just stay steady, generous, and true to what you believe. And perhaps what makes someone like Clint truly remarkable isn't that he's never made mistakes, but that he's never lost his strength of character. From a boy who once slept in a truck, to a director at 94, he never chose a loud life but made the whole world pause in his silence. That story doesn't end in a final scene. It continues every time we slow down, choose more carefully, and believe there's still room in this world for kindness. Have you ever seen yourself in one of Clint Eastwood's characters, ever been moved by a scene he created? If so, feel free to share in the comments below. Because legacy isn't something you show off, it's something you quietly pass on long after you're gone.